Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Demystify Selling with Microsoft. And I'm super excited for my conversation today with Chris Marin. Chris comes to us from the Azure side of the business. And so I think it's going to be a really informative discussion and one that we can put into practice right away. So, Chris, welcome.
Rob, great to be here, and shout out to all of the partners out there. Thank you for your collaboration. My name is Chris Marin, or Chris Marin. I'm what we call an Azure Infrastructure Sales Manager, or STU Manager. You may have heard that term. It stands for the Specialist Technology Unit. I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I lead a team of 7 folks in what we call South Region, which is roughly the southeast quadrant of the United States. And we sell to about 90 customers. 6 of my sellers do. I also have accountability for the SAP on Azure responsibility. And that expands to all of our clients in South Region, which is about 250, give or take. And our client set is roughly all of those which have not been verticalized in North America. So if it's not retail CPG or high tech or manufacturing or financial services or one of the public sector or health, that's us. So that our primary industries include energy, logistics, aviation, think airlines, large airlines, professional services firms, and some specialized distribution like automotive, to include some of the tire manufacturers and some of the large distributors like Napa, known as Genuine Products Corporation. That's a little bit about our territory and our function, and maybe just to drill one level deeper, and then I'll pause, Rob, and we can get into questions. When Microsoft says infrastructure, if you see that label attached to an Azure team, that's our primary. They think about it as a major in an educational context. That's what we focus on, but we get paid on all Azure, whether it's infrastructure, data, modernization, security. And so I coach my team to say, or to think, how can I get my peer that might major in those areas? How do I get them a qualified opportunity so that they can then come into our business, into my account, and help me? So we have this name, this title that says infrastructure, but we really care about all Azure. Is that good for an intro, Rob?
That's fantastic. I mean, that really helps people sort of level set and understand your world. So I love that. And I did want to point out, and we had this conversation briefly before we jumped on our call today, was the label of specialist to me seems, it seems a little overwhelming because you've got this platform in Azure that is massive, and not to mention the verticals that you cover. So, I'd love for you to just talk a minute about how you coach your team and how you think about really managing a platform of this size of Azure.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that is where the concept of a major does help, because all of our plays internally will be tuned to more infrastructure as opposed to data and AI and security. And we need to be cognizant of those, but we have that primary accountability around things like the Azure VMware solution for clients that are trying to figure out, what do I do with Broadcom licensing strategy, right? Their change there, or open source. I've got a large Linux estate on premises. How do we help clients with their modernization strategy? But to our specific conversation, this concept of being an Azure specialist, for all of you out there, I said it's really a bit of a misnomer, because Azure is so broad, it's so deep, right? You're moving out and going deep, that it's more important, in my opinion, to know how you learn best, and then can respond, can both be curious and integrate learning on a regular basis, and then respond quickly to client questions that you may not know the answer to, than it is to say, I'm going to stay up all night and learn everything that's out on Microsoft Learn or in
Right.
Microsoft Docs, because one, you can't predict the future. You never know what a client's going to ask about. Aside from broad trends, Broadcom licensing, that's a pretty consistent wave. We have high overlap between VMware and Microsoft, so we know that's coming. But getting esoteric in that play or other questions that a client may have, it's tough to predict. So that's why I go back to this point. Other than establishing maybe a baseline around a certification, it's almost better to know the modality that you like to learn on, because this is what I didn't explain. There's a ton of content out there. So whether it's, hey, I want to go to John Saville's YouTube channel, and while that's mainly technical, he breaks Azure down really well for non-technical folks. And I want to just learn through video versus Learn, which is more structured learning or training around Azure, versus Docs, which is all the product information in product marketing terms or product manager terms, versus something else, LinkedIn posts or case studies. However you best absorb that information on an ongoing basis, it's there. So having the tactic and then integrating a strategy of making the time on a consistent basis, again, I think that's more important, because it sounds trite. The concept of being a learn-it-all at Microsoft, we do try to execute on that vision that Satya talks about. It is not it's not marketing fluff.
No, absolutely. And to your point about, things are innovating in Azure in real time. I mean, you just posted something recently about Microsoft Copilot Studio on Azure. So a whole new talk track, a whole new thing to learn in terms of, yeah, I might understand Copilot Studio, but how is it delivered? So I mean, I can appreciate this is just such a massive role, and being able to understand how you learn and how to get to that information quickly is real, truly valuable. So I love that. Thanks for kind of walking us through that.
You bet.
I'd love to shift gears on you a little bit and talk about partners. It sounded like from, when we started the call, you had mentioned that you engage with partners and thanking them for that. And maybe you can talk about your level of involvement with the partner community. Is that something you see your team benefiting from, is those partner relationships? So just take a moment and walk us through that.
Yeah, 100%. So um, Rob knows what I've talked about is what does a successful engagement look like for, I would say, new relationships versus ongoing relationships, and how are they different? So I will get a lot of inquiries. When I say a lot, I mean 1 to 2 a week, pretty consistently on LinkedIn, from partners that say, I've got this and that cert, and I'd love to talk to you. And what I typically come back to them with are 2 general questions. One, how are you working in my region with my clients? Or how could you target this segment aggressively from an integrated sales marketing campaign? And 2, what unique intellectual property might you have? And that, I don't want that to sound too intimidating. What I'm not saying is you have to be a Tesla or an Edison or an Einstein. What I am trying to say, though, is that you have some unique differentiation. That could be, hey, Chris, we're pretty good at AWS to Azure migrations, and we have an offer there because we've done that very consistently. Or GCP, let's say. Or, hey, we have a stage 0 to stage 1 or stage 2. We have a 5-stage sales process, incidentally, at Microsoft. But we have an early stage process on how to identify and build a pipeline for you, because we know, Microsoft, that you in enterprise, and this is true in the United States, you don't have an inside sales team. Right. You don't have anyone that can do outbound calling for you. So we've developed a process that can help you build your funnel in stage 0, stage 1, find you net new leads, aside from what you can get on your digital estate. So we do have an ability to look at information where folks might register or download information, and we can contact them if they allow us to. We're very
Yeah.
big on privacy, right?
Mhm.
But we don't have an inside sales team where we can call up our friend, um, and ask them, please do outbound calling to my clients for the next week on this campaign.
Yeah.
So I, I'll check in with you to see if that made sense. But again, I try to, for new partners, I try to anchor the conversation in those areas. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does. It does. The two steps there, the two main questions that you have are spot on. And that second question really leads me into, and what I think about when you say that is they're coming to you not necessarily with unique intellectual property like Einstein, but a unique process. So I've got a sales process that's unique to my organization, and that's something that's of value to you and your sellers. Is that, as an example, I've got a sales development team or an SDR team. And if I can lean in with you on your customers, that's a unique sort of strategy or a unique thing I could bring to you as a partner. Am I getting that
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great, great.
Where it tends to fall flat is where someone leads with a certification.
Hmm.
We're we have X certification or Y certification.
Yeah,
And with due respect, I understand that it takes effort, and some cases a lot of effort to get those certs. And I don't mean to discount them.
hmm,
It's more to say I'm already working with partners that have those certifications,
yeah,
and I understand that ecosystem decently well. And we work, to answer your question up front, we work with partners all the time, right? From
yeah,
a post sales point of view, less so as I'm explaining from the pre sales point of view. And that's arguably where we need some more help. Um, so that's why I anchor on these concepts of a process, especially on the pre-sale side that you
hmm,
may have, or existing relationships. I will admit, sometimes when you work at these large companies and you've been here for a while, you think, oh, I know my customer really well. I've I think I have a good handle on the touch points. And you may get a little bit of a dismissive air from some folks at Microsoft. I hope not me, to be clear, that says, hey, I know everything about
yeah,
all the relationships. I know the partner ecosystem. I've never heard of you.
right.
And if you get that as a partner, bite your tongue, please, and just say to the Microsoft person, well, in case you didn't know, we've been talking to client XYZ or working with them for X amount of time, or we've done following past performance. There is a likelihood that an account team, whether that be an account executive or an account technology strategist, essentially these are the folks that own the all up relationship with the account, or someone in the STU, which I've already explained is a specialist technology unit. These are all the specialists that sell only Azure, modern work, business applications, and Dynamics, et cetera, security. That we may not know. And so
Yeah,
you may just need to be patient with us and say, hey, yeah, you know these folks fairly well, but we've been working with this area of line of business,
yeah.
and we've actually helped them procure something completely invisible to IT because IT wasn't moving fast enough. Does that make sense, Rob?
It does, it does, and it leans into something I like to coach partners on is the concept of three R's, and this is something I learned from another Microsoft person, Jamie Foxx, was revenue, relationships, and relevance. And I think revenue is self-explanatory, but you touched on relationships and how important that is from a partner community to understand. That's a lot of value to you. If I can bring that to the Microsoft team and say, to your point, I know the line of business folks may be over in finance or in whatever operations. So I love that you pointed that out. So I think that's key there. And then the relevance leans back to what you said earlier, which is I'm bringing something relevant, whether it's a unique approach, a unique sales process. So I love that you kind of packaged all that together. Let me ask you around sales plays, and you alluded to this a little bit, I think, and I'd just like to double down on that conversation of the VMware discussion or other different plays like Copilot. How important to you and your team is that for a partner to come to the table with those types of plays to say, look, we can help you do X?
I think it helps a lot. And I'm thinking of someone who approached me on LinkedIn recently, and 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 they didn't. It was a little bit more scattered. We work
Mhm.
with this team and this team and this team and this team. They didn't answer my question that I had asked them about. Are they working specifically in South region and what's unique? It was, well, we're
Yeah.
working with them. So when you've invested in that time and you can align frankly, some of the funding dollars that are already allocated
Mhm.
and then the just the natural inertia that's going on in the marketplace around, let's say, Broadcom and AVS, it's very helpful because really maybe for two reasons. One, it shows you're already speaking our language and you've spent some time thinking through it. And then if you have done that, then the second advantage is it's as I or as someone on my team starts to work with you, we just start getting to outcomes faster
Right.
because you've thought through some of those steps. You've you've pitched it already. You have content already. You maybe, hopefully, have figured out how you can get funding already. Or you've worked with another Microsoft team and you've worked out this really works, this approach when we do things together, and this other way doesn't. And you're bringing all of that to the table. So yes, understanding at least a few of the solution plays is very helpful. Again, I'll go back to my comment to be consistent. Should you know every solution play out there? I mean, kudos if you do.
Right.
But I think in general, and I've worked with partners and I've worked with small businesses for over 20 years, focus is really critical. I would prefer a partner to do three things well than 10 things poorly. I know it sounds really logical, but there's a temptation to say we do everything. And I
Yeah.
would encourage you, and I don't know if this runs counter to your advice, so forgive me if it does. Do three things really well,
Yeah.
and do three plays really well.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there, Chris. I think, being a jack of all trades, especially in Azure, I mean, that's just not even realistic. I
It's
mean,
hard.
I would argue it's impossible when it comes to Azure. But to your point, if you can be the master at two, three things, all day long, or I would imagine then, or your team knows, if you put me at an at bat for that thing, I'm going to knock it out of the park. And that's
Yeah.
what we all want. I mean, we want the customer to reach their outcome. We want the customer to have that good outcome. We get the consumption, both as the partner and as Microsoft. It's a win-win-win in my mind. So I love that. As we're coming to a close here, I think one point I wanted to just call out something you mentioned in terms of those different cycles in your sales process, and I assume you're referring to MSAM, the Microsoft Customer
Yes.
Engagement Model. And
Was trying to stay away from acronyms, but you are
that's
correct.
one that's one we can't get away from. I think as a partner, if you don't know that, you're in trouble from day one. So, but what are some of the challenges you see? And you've alluded to a couple of them, but what are one or two of the challenges you see from a partner community that really hold partners back today?
Um, I well, at the risk of repeating myself, I would say it's focusing on the wrong thing, i.e., come in and saying certification this, certification that, as opposed to trying to get very quickly to explaining an outcome and putting that front and center. So if you, I mean, I
No, I love that, Chris. I think
does that
that
make sense?
it
You know?
does. It's worth repeating is that, if as a partner, if you don't show up knowing and have clarity on how you're going to help move the ball forward for Microsoft, I think you're going to be hard pressed to really build that relationship and to deliver on those three R's of revenue, relevance, and relationship. So, yeah, no, I love that, Chris. So thanks for that.
You bet.
And I want to thank you for your time, Chris. I know that we have a stop coming up here, so I want to be cognizant of that. And if someone wants to get a hold of you or reach out and learn more about you, is LinkedIn the best place to do that?
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
So my tag is in/Chris Marin. C like Charlie, H Hilo, R Romeo, I-S, and then my last name, Marin, M like Mike, A-R-I-N like November. So in/Chris Marin.
Great. Chris, thank you again. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed this conversation, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Rob, as
Take care.
well. Really